When I think back on all the fears when I was pregnant, all of them dismissed except for one. The only test the state mandated was genetic. Looking for that extra chromosome.
Hello, and welcome to the If We Knew Then podcast. I'm Steven Socks.
And I'm Lori Socks.
Today is a really exciting interview.
So exciting.
We are joined by Ed Casagrande and Matt MacNeil from the Canadian Down Syndrome Society.
The Canadian Down Syndrome Society has this amazing initiative called Project Understood.
Project Understood is a collaboration between the Canadian Down Syndrome Society and Google AI, and they're creating a database that can help train Google's speech recognition technology to better understand people with Down syndrome.
And what I want to do is I want to give just a huge kudos to Google for being the front runner on this. Because when you have a major corporation that steps up and makes you part of the conversation, then you become part of the conversation. And I think that's what we want. We want to be heard. We want our children to be heard. We want our community to be heard. And they are literally making it possible for us to be heard and understood. It's inclusion at its finest point. It's what we fight for in society, in education, and now Google has teamed up with the Canadian Down Syndrome Society to say, we're going to give you that support so you are part of the conversation. And it's been long awaited and should be celebrated. And so thank you, Google, because I hope many follow in your footsteps. An actual part of our speech therapy training that we do with Liam, we try to incorporate fun little games, is we work with our home virtual assistant and work with Liam to do commands. And when it actually understands him or he gets it to work, we always celebrate it.
Yeah.
So we're looking forward to this technology and we can't wait to learn more about it.
Speech recognition is something I use on a daily basis in my life with texting or even email. And it's really nice to think that this is something that our kids will be able to use in the future. Both of our kids.
Absolutely.
Okay, now first I want to give a quick shout out to Kristen Halpin.
Wait. Do we have a bell? We have to give a proper. We have to do a proper shout
There's
out
a
here.
bell.
Wait, hold on. Don't ask me why I have a bell so close.
So,
Wait, here's our shout out.
yeah, so that's for Kristen Halpin, who is the Marketing and Communications Manager at CDSS, and she was so helpful in coordinating, and her communication was wonderful, but she was so helpful in coordinating the Skype interview today.
Okay, so let's get started. Ed and Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having us. We're excited to be here.
Maybe we could talk a little bit first. If you could just introduce yourselves. Can we start with you, Ed? If you introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about how you got involved in this project.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Ed Casagrande. I'm the chair of the board for the Canadian Down Syndrome Society. I've been on the board for just over 5 years and joined the board just after the birth of my daughter, Emma, who's now 6. Emma has Down syndrome, and I have 2 other boys, Peter, who's 8, Tommy, who's 4. I have a marketing background and felt I could bring some of that communications and marketing background to the board or to the Canadian Down Syndrome Society in terms of raising awareness on some key issues and opportunities and hopefully change some public perception.
Thank you. And Matt?
Also, my name is Matt MacNeil. I'm also part of Canadian Down Syndrome Society. I'm also the Self-Advocacy Committee Chair, and also called VADA. We help Canadian Down Syndrome Society a lot of stuff with the VADA group.
Yeah, as self-advocates, Matt and his team provide obviously great insights for us, especially when we're trying to create, awareness campaigns and really understanding real life challenges and opportunities that someone with Down syndrome would face. And while we have, many people with Down syndrome in our lives, it's great to get that firsthand information from self-advocates. So Matt is the chair of the VADA group, which is Voices at the Table for Advocacy. It's our self-advocate group at the Canadian Down Syndrome Society.
And I know you've both done so much for the Canadian Down Syndrome Society, but today we'll talk specifically about Project Understood, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about that project.
Yeah, so for the past 4 years, the Canadian Down Syndrome Society puts out a major awareness campaign during the first week in November, and that coincides with Canadian Down Syndrome Week. We start the process on trying to tackle some, real situations, opportunities, real life scenarios. We've focused in the past in terms of handling some of the myths when it comes to Down syndrome, providing resources, speaking to some of the limitations to support for people with Down syndrome. So we tend to tackle different issues over the years. So early in 2019, we sat down, and started discussing, what should we be focusing on? So we reached out to the VADA group, so Voices at the Table for Advocacy, and we just had dialogue to understand, what should we be focusing on? What are some real life opportunities, challenges that you're going through? And what came up in those discussions a lot was accessibility. The frustrations of not being able to do something because of X, Y, and Z. And while we continue to have those discussions, technology kept coming up and how some of the challenges around technology where, it's meant to make things easier, but in fact, for some, it makes things a little bit harder. We have a great communications partner, FCB, who have offices around the world, but we deal with the FCB Canada team, who's been working with us over the years to come up with these projects. So when we landed on accessibility, and then through the discussions, technology, and then it evolved to voice technology, and with someone with different speech patterns, there are even more challenges. Like, a typical person experiences challenges with voice technology, when you're speaking into your whatever device you have, and, sometimes it comes back saying something totally different than what you said. So, just picture that happening more often with someone with Down syndrome. So, we were in this area for voice technology. So then, the team kind of went off and kind of did some research and came across an initiative that Google AI is doing called Project Euphonia, where they were looking at speech impairments, different speech patterns with the ALS community, and they were just at the looking at their technology with those speech patterns. So we approached them with the idea of bringing Down syndrome as part of the scope of this project, and from there that sparked the discussions and brought us to this campaign where we were recruiting people with Down syndrome to log into projectunderstood.ca to provide voice samples in order to strengthen the voice technology with Google.
And you were talking about coming up with the idea during Canadian Down Syndrome Week. When is that, by the way?
Yeah, so it happens every year, November 1st. So basically for the first week in November is Canadian Down Syndrome Week. So we like to, we typically put out a larger awareness campaign to coincide with that. So we launched Project Understood November 1st, 2019.
That's amazing. And you had mentioned FCB. I just want to clarify what that was.
So FCB is a large advertising communications firm. They have various offices throughout the world. We connected with them in Toronto about 5 years ago, given that my background in marketing communications, and felt that there's a great opportunity to again raise awareness on some key issues and opportunities as it relates to Down syndrome, and with the hopes of changing overall public perception. So yeah, FCB has been a great partner throughout this whole process.
Well, it's a brilliant idea. I mean, it's just wonderful. I wonder, didn't you guys fly to California and get a tour of some things? How did things look?
Yeah, well, Matt, what were some of your impressions when we went to California?
Mostly, I was so impressed how it looked like Google HQ. I can't say that enough. I'm speechless, really.
Yeah, but it was great to see such an inviting environment.
Yeah,
Obviously
definitely.
much warmer weather than what we were used to at that time of year. But it was just great to speak to some of the folks that are involved in this project, because prior to that, all the conversations were obviously over the phone, and we started going down the path of doing some tests to see whether or not some voice samples from people with Down syndrome would be able to strengthen the technology and have that, the voice technology learn from that. So we did a small test, and Matt was part of the group that did the test prior to going to California. And then when we went to California, we did find out that, okay, we can, there is learning when we're able to provide voice samples from people with Down syndrome. And Matt did some more recordings down there, met the team, and really kind of put the path in place to begin recruiting people for this project.
And for this AI to work, for Project Understood to really come into fruition, we need donated voices, correct?
Yeah, to date we have just over 600 voices of people donated. Matt, can you speak to some of the phrases that you had to say as part of the project?
So what I remembered was I like a yo-yo today.
Yeah, you're right. There was a whole bunch of sentences that people with Down syndrome would record. In fact, one, I guess to complete the project for one person, that it's 1,700 phrases. So that's a lot of phrases that could be completed, obviously, over multiple sittings.
Yeah.
So having 600 people, participate, where it's a big time commitment, where you have to record 1,700 phrases, is a big undertaking. We're just thrilled the success to date. So it was really much an awareness campaign in terms of participate in this project so that we can get ahead of the curve in terms of trying to shape voice technology, because as we all know, voice will replace the keyboard when it comes to triggering the internet or technology or what have you. So instead of playing catch up, or instead of not being able to take advantage of that technology, we felt that this is great, that we can help shape the technology so that it's usable to our community.
Well, it is a big time commitment, but I think of it as like when you want to record your thumbprint on an iPhone, you have to do it several times and move your thumb around. And so this lets the AI really get a real sample of your voice and your different phrases. There's so many different phrases and sounds in the human voice. Through this project, what have you seen? What have you learned from this project just personally?
For me, first and foremost, the dependence of technology, not only for a typical person, but with someone with Down syndrome. If you look at someone like Matt, he relies on his phone and the internet for scheduling work and appointments and communicating. So if a person like Matt doesn't have the accessibility to use the technology, then it's very difficult. So technology is supposed to be an equalizer. So the inputs to that technology needs to be workable for everyone. So I've learned that because we rely on technology so much, that those who can't use it the same as some others, you really see the gap there.
Well, I can understand that as a dad, that what I want for my child's future. And Matt, I see this as being something that is going to be able to be used for you as well. I'm assuming that there's really no timeline of this, but depending on how many people we can get to donate their voices, it's going to dictate how long it takes for this technology to come out.
Yeah, and we're just at the I think there's lots to go when it comes to voice technology, because we're just speaking English language, right? So there's all different languages out there, different speech patterns within communities. So there's lots to do still when it comes to voice technology in general. And again, we're just speaking in relation to Google, but there are many other platforms out there. So it's not something that it's going to be ready 6 months from now. It's just part of the long process, and we're just thrilled to be a part of it at this stage of the process.
And we all want that tech to work better for everyone, and I think you're getting a lot of input from typical voices into AI all the time. So this is fantastic to have a select group like like a group that we're so passionate about to be able to input those voices. Now, is it presently just English that's being recorded?
Yeah, right now it's English speaking and 18 years and older.
That's criteria. Got it. Now, I'll put links in the show notes of everything that people would need to donate their voice, but maybe you could just give the details of how someone that's interested in participating in this project could go ahead and do it.
Yeah, so you would go to our website, projectunderstood.ca. There you'll see a very clear description of the project and the steps involved in the project. Step one is clicking the donate your voice button, to complete an interest form. You'll get an email from Google where you start recording some preliminary phrases, and then they take those preliminary phrases to see whether or not the technology is able to learn from that. And if so, then you're getting the full login and you're recording the phrases. Matt, can you tell us a little bit about your experience when you logged in and recorded the phrases? Anything you wanted to share with that?
Yeah, in the beginning, when I started doing my recordings, I like to read it over before I recorded it so I know what to say, what not to say, and how to make sure my voice is clear enough so my computer can pick up my voice. So, yeah.
Yeah, and we've heard some instances where someone would have someone helping them in terms of perhaps if they weren't able to hear or read the phrase, someone would read it to them, and then they would
maybe repeat it right after.
Yeah, so it's flexible that way, but like I said, it's a longer process in terms of 1,700 phrases is a lot. Wow, how long did it take you again, Matt, to do the 1,700?
It took me almost 2.5 days.
And you were going like all out all the time with it. We've heard some instances where they've spread it out over a week or two. So it's you can pick up where you left off and come back and forth as much as you want.
Yeah.
But projectunderstood.ca is the first step.
Is the information that Google's receiving, are they able to apply that as they go, or is it kind of upon completion that they'll be able to create a system?
It's apply as you go. So it's just, the technology is always learning. It learns best through repetition and quantity. So yeah, there isn't like a set number that we're waiting to hit before we, then teach the technology to recognize all that. It's ongoing.
Since you've begun this project, is there anything that you've learned that has changed what you think about or how you're creating the accessibility?
Yeah, well, I guess when it comes to voice technology, right now it's all about the fun stuff, right? Accessing music, movies, buy stuff, check the weather. It's the fun, entertaining stuff. But when you look at the future and what can happen, you could picture booking appointments, or when there's driverless cars out there, speaking into your voice assistant, say, hey, whomever, pick me up to take me to my job, for shopping. Like there's just so much there. And then there's the two-way communication aspect where there's discussions and people, numerous TED Talks on this, where they talk about vocal biomarkers, where the technology is able to understand through the tone of your voice or how your voice sounds, whether or not, you're ill. So just picture, waking up, hi Google, and oh, hey Matt, or hey Ed, you sound stuffy today. Would you like to call a doctor? Like you can see where it can go. And I guess another thing as I think about the future with this, is companionship. So I think of my daughter and and I hear of stories from other people who have Down syndrome. School, very inclusive, lots of activities, friends, lots of fun, lots of interactions and participation. But then as someone graduates from school, things start to taper off a bit, and especially if your friends have moved on to school and you're not going to school, or you're not working or whatever. So there tends to be a dip when it comes to companionship. So not to say that this would replace humans, but if it becomes more of a two-way communication technology, and it won't be one way. And I think that would contribute to fighting against someone feeling like they're isolated or lonely. So, not to say that it would replace human voices, but there would be that two-way communication that I think would be highly beneficial.
And maybe particularly in those Canadian winters.
Can I ask you, how old are you, Matt?
I am 30 right now.
And so my question for you with technology is, obviously there's been great leaps and bounds in technology over the last 30 years. How has technology changed your life and your experiences?
Like, I love technology, really. Seems to me that I use it a lot, so mostly it changed my life because it's really helped me look for different recipes on cooking and stuff. So it's like telling me how I can be independent, it helps me to learn that I can use then typing and then talking.
Yeah, and just further to that, having hung around with Matt and lots of people with Down syndrome in their late teens and early 20s, the reliance on their phone is the same as a typical person. So it's staying connected. It's looking for
Kind of
recipes.
like if I had a quick text to Ed, I just send to my phone to a quick text to Ed instead of me just doing a big long text by hand. I just do my voice instead.
Yeah, which is the same as any other typical person would want to communicate, short to the point, using text. So I don't see a difference, and there's just that reliance of technology to stay connected with friends and families as a key driver for this.
Well, I guess the reason why I was so interested, Matt, in what technologies and how they've changed for you is because our son Liam is 10 years old. And so our experience as parents we've fought for Liam's education. We're constantly advocating for equality, mostly right now because he's 10 with his education. And one of the things that has always brought me hope was technology and how it's changing to equalize the playing field for my son and the hope that what's out there, like Ed, you had mentioned the self-driving cars, that brings me joy to think about. So I wanted to try to understand or have a picture of how that's changed for you just in your journey over the last 30 years.
Yeah. I rely on it, yes, definitely for my activities for the day. Helps me keep track on things that I might forget. Yeah, it really helped a lot since I use my phone a lot on my computer. So, yeah.
And how would you feel if, you didn't have your phone or the internet connection was down?
I'd be lost if I don't have any technology.
Well, that's true for so many of us, right? I mean, it's the world.
To my point, it's the same as everybody.
No, I love that it's opening so many opportunities.
Yeah, I just see it as the new trigger. Like I said, it replaces the keyboard. So, when you hear about the Internet of Things, where your refrigerator is going to be hooked up to the internet or whatever, it just seems like, as scary technology may seem when you think about the future, I'm very hopeful that technology will allow my daughter to show all her abilities and her to be a fully contributing member of society the way she wants it to be. So, and that's, at the end of the day, that's what we all want. We want to be contributors to society. And, if there is something that is able to level the playing field, then I'm all for it.
Absolutely. It really does bring me so much hope with the technology and even just the changes that Liam has experienced, even with this homeschooling. I find that he's progressing more because he can go online and today he signed up for summer school and the Down syndrome didn't even come into play until he logged in and the teacher saw them. So it eliminated all of the other misconceptions that people might have and their want to put him in a certain box. Nobody knew. So he just jumped right in with everybody else, which I feel is how it should be.
Yeah, I think we're gonna find, given the current situation with COVID-19 is that we're going to have a new normal. And I think even a greater reliance on technology in order to stay connected and to learn and to entertain and communicate. So technology isn't going anywhere. And voice will be, in my opinion, the dominant trigger to that technology.
Well, one of the first videos I saw after learning about Project Understood was a video that you and Matt did, which was a virtual presentation to the UN, which was pretty fascinating and exciting, I bet, for you guys. Specifically, Matt, can you tell me about that experience?
It was a really good experience doing a virtualized UN. I went the year before to the UN in New York, so it was fun doing it a different way because it's online. So it's fun recording it with Ed, and our message that we sent gave a good impact through this project.
Yeah, it was unfortunate that we weren't able to go there in person to present, this project, but we were glad that we were able to participate via video. And yeah, as Matt said, he was there a few years back in person, actually communicating our first campaign. So it was just great to promote this campaign, this project on a global scale, via the United Nations. So it's a personal thrill for me, obviously, and it's the second time around for Matt, so it's no big deal, I would assume, right, Matt? Been there, done that, right?
Well, we had kind of touched on it before about perceptions of Down syndrome. What particularly do you think of as perceptions you'd like to change about Down syndrome?
Well, I think, first and foremost, it's about people first. So, when I think of my daughter or Matt, Down syndrome is a part of them, but it doesn't define who my daughter is or who Matt is. So, it's really, at the bare minimum is like, it's a person. We're all people. We're people first. And there are lots of different people out there with lots of different abilities. So before having my daughter, and I didn't know much about Down syndrome, but the things that I probably thought about when I thought about Down syndrome were the limitations, or what a person with Down syndrome can't do. Since having my daughter, and obviously meeting lots of people with Down syndrome like Matt, and seeing their abilities, has changed my perception that I need to focus on the abilities, and there's lots of abilities, and it's just a matter of raising the bar and giving them the opportunity to reach those abilities. Sometimes people with Down syndrome need a little bit of help on certain things, just like anyone else, but with the right resources and support, they can conquer many of those challenges that they're often faced with and maybe weren't able to overcome in the past. So that's what this whole journey has taught me in terms of people first, and not only within the Down syndrome community, it's everyone. And what we're seeing right now, what we're going through right now in terms of what's happening across North America in terms of some of the protests echoes that. We're all people. We all should be treated equally with dignity, respect. And we need to be aware that there isn't one typical person. There are lots of different people in this world.
I love it.
Yeah, it's an amazing time because I see true change, and this is part of it. This project. Matt, do you have similar thoughts in what perceptions you may be breaking through with this project and just with your life?
Yeah, I know that we all might be different, but we all can make a difference. And I'm always saying that every time because it is making a difference. We are people first, like Ed said. I want people to see that things that we can do and things that we can't do. And most of the things that we can't do, we can do.
Matt, how often are people surprised when they find out that you live on your own with some
A lot of people are
roommates?
surprised being on my own, being independently. Then I'm breaking through barriers.
how often are people surprised when they find out that, you've held the same job for, is it 12 years now?
Yep.
Yeah, or I don't know if you saw one of the videos for Project Understood, but Matt rides his bike to work to check his schedule into work, and he was also riding one of the Google bikes at the Google campus, and that surprised a lot of people. Again, it's just it's just changing the perceptions of
Changing
what
the
someone
ability
can
that we
do.
can do stuff that we can do and stuff that we can train people to experience of what we can do.
Well, I've just enjoyed speaking to the both of you for so many reasons. I love what you're doing with Project Understood. Um, I think it was like a year and a half ago, Stephen was talking about technology and AI, and that was a big concern because as they were talking about, getting voices into technology, he brought up, what about
AI advocacy for Down syndrome is what I wrote down in my goals. Was because I'm kind of a tech guy, and so I said there needs to be a representation for Down syndrome in AI.
So we were so excited when we heard about your project because we know the advances of technology and we know how technology opens up so many possibilities. So on that level with your project, it's been great. And I love putting the information out there because I think it's a beacon of hope. And I think that the more hope we can get to other parents and, adults living with Down syndrome and kids in school with Down, that's hope. That's, there's people on your side and we know what we can do. And I love it. I love that the word is being put out there. And then on a personal level, to hear, Ed, your experience as another parent and your honesty, I appreciate it. Because being a parent, even just seeing you, I'm 4 years down the line from you. I always love to hear how things change. And when you're talking about having an inclusive classroom as a given, that makes me so happy because Liam's inclusive classroom was not a given, and we had to fight really hard to make that happen. So I love that now, 4 years later, that's just something that happens. And Matthew, thank you so much for sharing because you give me so much hope for my son to know, that you're out there and you're doing it. And what needs to happen is everybody needs to see and know that you're out there and you're doing it, and everybody can be out there doing it. And it's having the support. And so I appreciate you sharing your stories because as a parent, it makes me happy.
It really does.
And vehicles like your podcast allows Matt to tell his story and people hear Matt's story. So we're all in this together.
Yep.
Ed, Matt, thank you for joining us. It's been a pleasure talking with you today.
Thank you very much for having us part of your podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Please follow us on Twitter at If We Knew Then Pod, and you can drop us a line on our Facebook page at If We Knew Then Pod, or visit our website, ifweknewthen.com, to send us an email with questions and comments. And you can join our mailing list there and get alerts of future podcast episodes. All these links will be added to this episode's show notes. Thank you again, and we look forward to you joining us on the next episode of If We Knew Then.